I arrived at the estate beneath a waning moon, its pallid light casting skeletal shadows upon the time-ravaged stones. My carriage halted before the iron gates, rusted through the centuries, their spires reaching upward as though in supplication to an indifferent sky. The manor loomed beyond, a monolith of decay, its windows hollowed eyes peering through a veil of ivy and neglect. It was mine now, this forsaken relic of my bloodline, an inheritance neither sought nor welcomed. The letter had come weeks before, its script antiquated, its tone solemn. My last living relative, a great-uncle whom I had never met, had passed within these very walls, leaving to me the solitary burden of his estate. There was no warmth in this bequest, no sentiment in the brittle parchment, only a command, "Come at once, the house must not be left alone." I stepped forward, my boots sinking into the damp earth. The door yielded with a moan, ushering me into a void of silence and dust. Cobwebs hung in ghostly veils from the rafters, and the air bore the scent of age and ruin. Faintly, through the dim corridors I could hear the wind, weaving through unseen fractures in the stone, whispering like a voice just beyond the threshold of understanding. At the heart of the foyer stood a portrait, its frame tarnished with time, its canvas cracked and fading. A man stared from its depths, his visage eerily familiar. Dark eyes deep-set beneath a furrowed brow, lips pressed into a knowing smirk. His gaze, though lifeless, held me captive, as though he recognized me, as though he had been waiting. I turned away, an unease stirring within my chest, yet some nameless force compelled me deeper into the house, into the recesses of its forgotten past. The house did not greet me with the vacant hush of abandonment. It breathed, it watched. The very walls seemed imbued with memory, holding fast to the echoes of those who had walked here before me. As I moved through the corridors, my footfalls stirred the dust, but there were other sounds, soft, indistinct murmurs that did not belong to the wind. The vast parlour stretched before me, its grandeur faded, its chandeliers draped in neglect. Chairs stood as though their occupants had only just risen, their absence a ghostly presence in itself. A fireplace, long cold, bore the remnants of charred pages, their words lost to the hunger of the flames. A draught slithered past, extinguishing my candle, and in that sudden darkness I felt it, a gaze upon me, an unseen weight pressing against my ribs. My breath faltered, my pulse quickened. The sensation did not pass, but rather deepened, tightening around my throat with a slow, insidious grip. Somewhere, distant yet near, I heard my name. It was not the wind. I had known unease before, though I had never given it credence. A mere trick of the mind, I had always assured myself, nothing more than the fevered delusions of those given to superstition. Yet as I stood before the portrait, its gaze transfixing mine, I knew with a certainty that defied logic that something within those painted depths regarded me in return. The frame, once gilded, was now tarnished, its once regal lustre dulled by the relentless grasp of time. The image within, though faded, bore a striking resemblance to my own countenance, so much so that my breath caught within my throat. It was a man of stern visage, his hollowed eyes deep-set, his lips curled into a knowing smirk that seemed, even in its stillness, to shift with subtle mockery. A chill settled upon my spine as the candlelight flickered, elongating the shadows upon the walls. Was it merely the play of light, or had the expression upon that ancient face altered, if only in the barest of ways? I stepped closer, compelled, despite the warning, that screamed within my bones. The features remained unchanged, yet a deep and nameless dread coiled around my ribs, squeezing the breath from my lungs. I turned away, and in that instant the floor groaned beneath my weight. a sound not of aged wood bending, but of something deeper, something beneath. My pulse quickened. The house, I realized, was not merely old, it was listening. It was in the library where my unease festered into something more. The chamber was vast, its towering bookshelves filled with volumes long abandoned, their spines coated in the dust of neglect. A great mahogany desk stood at its heart, its surface littered with crumbling pages, the ink faded and unreadable. My fingers trailed absently along the tomes as I wandered, yet my thoughts were elsewhere, still lingering upon the portrait, upon its eyes that seemed to follow even now. It was then that my footfall landed upon something hollow. The sound reverberated through the chamber, distinct amidst the suffocating silence. I knelt, brushing aside layers of dust, revealing the jagged outline of a wooden panel set within the floor. My hands trembled as I pried it open, exposing a dark recess beneath. A cold breath of air exhaled from the void, carrying with it the scent of damp stone and something far more insidious, the unmistakable musk of decay. There, hidden beneath the bones of time, lay a door. And though I knew not what lay beyond, I knew, with an unshakable certainty, that it had been waiting. Would you like me to continue with the next subheadings? The night yielded no solace. My mind, burdened with an unrest I dared not name, twisted upon itself in a ceaseless repetition of whispered dread. I had sought sleep within the chamber that had once been mine in childhood, though time had stripped it of familiarity, leaving only the skeletal remains of what had once been. The bed, draped in a veil of dust, groaned beneath my weight. The air lay thick with the scent of age, and the walls seemed to contract ever so slightly, as though leaning inward to smother my thoughts. The wind whispered through the eaves, though in its susurrus I heard no mere wind. I heard voices, indistinct, shifting through the gloom like a hand brushing unseen against my cheek. I turned upon the mattress, seeking comfort in motion, and in doing so felt it, the telltale hardness of something beneath me, something buried within the dust-laden mattress. My breath caught, for the sensation was as if I had lain upon bone. With trembling fingers I reached beneath, and there, entombed within the rotted fabric, my hands closed upon an object cold as the grave, a key. It was ancient, its iron blackened, its surface marred with time's relentless grip. Yet as I turned it in my palm, a queer sensation overtook me, a pulse, a faint, rhythmic throb, as though the key itself yet lived, as though it breathed. I recoiled, and it fell to the floor with a dull clang. But the moment my fingers were free of it, a greater terror seized me, an absence, a yearning void where, inexplicably, my hand now ached to hold it once more. I should have fled. I should have cast it into the hearth and turned away. But even as the rational part of my mind screamed against it, my fingers found the key again, clutching it with desperate possession. And in that moment I knew this key had been waiting for me. Sleep abandoned me entirely. The candle's glow wavered as though trembling in expectation, and the key lay upon the bedside table, its blackened surface gleaming with a dull, insidious sheen. I told myself I would not descend. I told myself the door must remain shut, and yet an inexorable pull dragged me toward it, an unspoken command whispering through the marrow of my bones. I had always prided myself on reason, on intellect, beyond the follies of superstition. And yet, the mere thought of the cellar filled me with an unnameable dread, a dread that did not diminish but deepened with each passing moment. My feet moved of their own accord. The halls stretched before me, more labyrinth than home, their shadows deep and shifting, reaching toward me with grasping fingers. The portrait in the foyer loomed as I passed, its painted eyes boring into my flesh, its smirk curving deeper, as though it knew. The library yawned before me, its darkness thick, its silence expectant. The floor groaned beneath my weight, not in protest, but in welcome. My breath came in shallow gasps, my pulse hammering in my skull. The hidden panel lay bare, the door beneath it an open wound in the flesh of the house. The key, as though moving of its own volition, slid into the lock. For the briefest moment a hush fell, a silence so profound, so complete, that it seemed the world itself had ceased to breathe. Then, with a shuddering groan, the lock turned, and the door opened. The moment the key turned in the rusted lock, a breath, cold and stinking of rot, exhaled from the depths below, curling around my ankles with the caress of a corpse's fingers. It was not merely the staleness of long-sealed air, nor the damp musk of forgotten stone. No, this was something else, something far more insidious, more alive. A tremor ran through my hands as I pressed against the heavy door, the wood protesting as though reluctant to yield. And yet it did yield, with a groan so low and pained it might have been mistaken for the lamentation of the house itself. As the gap widened, darkness spilled forth, thick and inky, swallowing the feeble glow of my candle. The air grew heavier, my lungs fought against it, as though the atmosphere had turned dense with the weight of centuries. A suffocating stillness pervaded the threshold, as if time itself hesitated to step beyond. I should have fled. My very bones, my blood, every instinct that had been gifted to man by nature, screamed against the path I now took, and yet, as though bound by chains unseen, I descended. The steps groaned beneath my weight, each one trembling in protest, their stones slick with time's cruel decay. The candle wavered violently as though it too feared what lay below. The shadows recoiled, then crept forward, inching toward my feet like starving wretches. The door swung shut behind me, a final warning, a last chance for retreat. I ignored it. I pressed onward, my breath shallow, my grip unsteady. The walls, damp and close, bore strange carvings, symbols I did not recognize, words etched by a desperate hand. The further I ventured, the more I felt it, that sickly sensation of being watched, of unseen eyes peering from the abyss, waiting. And then at last the cellar revealed itself. The flickering light of my candle exposed a vast chamber, its walls lined with crumbling bookshelves, their contents bloated with mildew. Chains hung loosely from the stone, their iron corroded with age, their purpose unspoken, yet chillingly clear. At the center of it all stood a chair, wooden, simple, but clawed and splintered, marked by something that had struggled once. The whispers began then, faint, curling through the air like tendrils of smoke. I was not alone. A blackness unlike any I had ever known lay before me, dense, thick, and impenetrable. The feeble glow of my candle, flickering wildly in my trembling grasp, scarcely managed to pierce the suffocating gloom. The air was stagnant, burdened with the scent of damp earth and something far more putrid, an odor that coiled within my nostrils, thick and rancid, as if decay itself had taken root in the very stones. I descended, each step, slow, deliberate, yet hesitant, for the stairs beneath me did not feel as mere stone. They were slick, their surfaces glistening with something viscous, something warm. My mind recoiled from the thought, yet I could not deny the truth of it. The cellar wept. The deeper I ventured, the heavier the air became, pressing against my lungs with the weight of unseen hands. The darkness did not merely surround me, it crawled, shifting at the edges of my vision like a living thing, whispering in tongues I could not comprehend. I clung to reason, though it seemed to slip from my grasp as easily as the sweat upon my brow. There was no logic in the sounds that reached my ears, no sanity in the distant murmurs that drifted from unseen corners of the abyss. They were not mere echoes nor tricks of the wind. These voices were aware. A chill unlike any earthly cold wrapped itself around my spine as I became aware of something new, something far worse than the darkness, than the whispers, than the unnatural dampness beneath my feet. I was not alone. At first, it was but a sensation, a weight upon my chest, a pull at the edges of my thoughts. But then, as the candlelight flickered, I saw it, no, I felt it. A presence just beyond the periphery of my vision, shifting in the darkness, waiting. I halted, my breath frozen within my throat, my pulse hammering against my ribs. My mind fought against the dread clawing at its fragile edges, rationalizing, dismissing, yet I could not deny it. Something watched, something waited, and still I moved forward, drawn by a force I could neither name nor resist. The abyss yawned before me, vast and unending, and I descended further. I do not know how long I descended, nor how many steps I took before my weary feet at last met the cold, unyielding stone of the chamber floor. The descent had been eternal, each step drawing me deeper into the clutches of a dread I could not name. And yet, when I finally stood upon solid ground, I felt no relief, only a suffocating, all-consuming awareness that I had passed beyond the realm of the living. The air here was different, thick and leaden, as though imbued with the very breath of the long dead. My candle, though small, flared suddenly in the blackness, revealing what lay before me. A chamber vast and low, its ceiling pressing close like a coffin's lid. The walls, monstrous things of stone and damp, glistened with some unknown moisture, the scent of decay clinging to them like a second skin. Along these walls stood shelves crumbling with the weight of age, filled with books whose pages had bloated and blackened, their words long since lost to ruin. Yet it was not the books that held my gaze, nor the thick layers of dust that lay undisturbed upon the floor. It was the chains. They hung from the walls in clusters, thick iron links, rusted but unbroken, their shackles gaping wide like the yawning mouths of the damned. And there, at the heart of it all, beneath the weight of centuries, stood the chair. A grotesque thing of wood, ancient and splintering, its surface marred by deep and frantic gouges, marks left not by the hands of time but by the hands of something desperate, something that had once sat there in suffering unimaginable. The very sight of it, looming in the dim glow of my candle, filled my chest with a dread so pure, so visceral, that I nearly turned and fled. But I did not. For in that moment something shifted in the air. A sound, faint yet insistent, stirred the silence. It was not the wind, it was a whisper. I turned sharply, my breath ragged, my heart hammering against my ribs, but the chamber remained still, as though holding its breath waiting. The candle trembled in my grasp. The whisper came again, curling through the air like smoke, its syllables lost upon my ears but not upon my soul. For though I did not understand the words, I knew what they meant. I was not alone. For long moments I did not dare to move nor even to breathe. The chamber held its silence with an unnatural patience, as though it awaited some unspeakable ritual to unfold. My candle trembled in my grasp, its glow feeble against the vastness of the void. Yet in that light, flickering, uncertain, I saw the impossible. My shadow did not move. I turned my head, my breath a shuddering gasp in the heavy air. My limbs quivered, yet the dark silhouette upon the cold stone floor remained still, frozen in its posture, as if it had been severed from me, abandoned by my own form. And then came the horror that stole the very breath from my lungs. For beside my unmoving shadow, a second darkness loomed, monstrous, misshapen, and grotesque in its angles, as though it did not belong to anything human. It stretched along the wall, too elongated, too writhing in its grotesquerie, shifting ever so slightly when I did not. It was not cast by my candle, nor by any earthly light. It was a shadow born of something else, something unseen yet horridly present. My throat closed upon a cry, my fingers locking around the candle's base until the wax threatened to shatter beneath the force. The chamber, that abyss of dust and ruin, suddenly felt suffocating. The air thickened as though it congealed around me. The shadow watched me. No eyes, no shape to call its own, yet I felt its gaze upon my spine, crawling down my arms like unseen fingers. A movement, slight but undeniable, not my own. The candle's flame flared violently, casting the walls into a ghastly dance of trembling light, and in that shifting glow the grotesque shadow twisted, bent, reached. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering like a trapped thing against my ribs. The bookshelves groaned, the chains upon the walls trembled with a metallic whisper, as though they too had become aware of the presence that now shared the chamber. And then, as if mocking me, the shadow breathed. The candle wavered in my grip, its light dimming, waning against a darkness far more ancient than the walls that enclosed it. I do not know how long I stood frozen, nor how many moments passed where the air grew heavier, more burdened with that unspoken dread. Yet when at last I turned my gaze from that wretched, unholy shadow, my ears caught a sound that was not the wind nor the groaning of the house. It was a whisper. At first I thought it some trick of my mind, the mutterings of fear creeping upon the edges of reason. But no, this was real, unmistakable. The sound slithered through the air, curling through the dampness of the chamber like smoke, its cadence rhythmic, deliberate. Words just beyond understanding. I turned sharply, the candle trembling, casting its feeble glow upon the crumbling stone walls. I saw nothing, but I heard. The whispers coiled around me, rising and falling, as though a conversation was being held, just out of reach. A chorus of voices, soft yet insistent, murmuring in a tongue that did not belong to any living soul. And then I saw it. The walls, their surfaces, damp with age, had begun to shift, to pulse with a sickening, unnatural movement. I recoiled, my breath breaking into a shuddering gasp. The stone, no, not stone, flesh, writhing beneath a thin, veined surface, quivered as if it listened, as if it responded. The whispers grew louder. I pressed a hand against my temple, the sound burrowing deep, threading into my very marrow. The words still eluded me, yet I understood their meaning, their command. They were calling, summoning, and I was the one they called for. The walls trembled, their whispers turning to a low, resonant hum. The candle flickered violently, the grotesque shadow at my side stretching, reaching ever closer. The chains on the walls shuddered, as though they remembered the weight they had once borne. A terrible truth clawed its way into my mind, unbidden, undeniable. I was not the first to stand here. I would not be the last. And the house, this wretched, pulsing house, it was hungry. I should have left. My mind, now teetering on the precipice of madness, screamed at me to turn back, to flee from this dark, unholy place. Yet despite every instinct I could not. The walls themselves had beckoned, whispering in languages I could not understand, drawing me closer to the horror they concealed. As my candle flickered and waned, the shadows pressed in with an unbearable weight. The air grew colder still, thick with the scent of damp decay, and yet, amidst the overwhelming silence, something new stirred. A faint gleam of light from the candle illuminated the walls upon which were etched symbols, words, and phrases that twisted the very fabric of my sanity. They were not simple markings. No, they were carefully carved, painstakingly inscribed, each word laden with the weight of a curse long forgotten by time. Latin, an ancient tongue I had once studied, stared back at me with a force I had never known it to possess. The characters, though crude and uneven, bore an eerie, hypnotic allure, as though they sought to speak not to the mind, but to the very soul. "Abandon all hope," one phrase read, its letters twisted into grotesque shapes, "for here the damned shall remain as they have always remained." I recoiled, my breath catching in my throat. Yet even as I staggered away, an irresistible compulsion pulled me closer again. The words spoke of darkness, of endless suffering and sorrow that awaited all who dared to enter. And still I could not resist. I leaned in closer, my eyes tracing the cruel lines of the inscription, feeling the pull of their meaning, though it twisted my heart with dread. Another inscription. To open the door is to seal the fate of all who follow. And still I could not stop. The house, this forsaken tomb, seemed alive, its very bones groaning under the weight of its unutterable history. My trembling fingers brushed the stone, and I felt a pulse, faint but unmistakable, as though the wall itself responded to my touch. In that moment, I realized the truth. This was not merely a place of confinement, it was a prison, for me, for all who had dared to step within. The curse was not some ancient relic. It was a living force, bound to this place, bound to the very walls that now whispered its condemnations into my mind. But even now, as my rational thoughts fled, there was no turning back. The words had already taken root, and I was its next victim. Nightfall was a curse, and sleep, a distant memory. I found no solace in the darkened corners of the manor, for they too had become infected with the malignant presence of the cellar. The deeper I ventured into that infernal place, the more my thoughts became clouded with a malevolent fog, and the whispering of the walls followed me, seeping into my very dreams. At first, I sought refuge in sleep, hoping that the fatigue of the day would grant me respite. But no, sleep, like all things in this house, betrayed me. Each time I closed my eyes, the darkness behind my lids seemed to press upon me, tighter, closer, as though the air itself sought to smother me. Faces, horrid, faceless, shifting figures, danced at the edges of my consciousness. Their mouths did not move, but their words were clear, pressing upon my mind like an iron fist. "You are the one, you are the next." I could not escape them. I could not escape the truth that they spoke, for I knew it, even as it shattered my reason. I was not a guest in this place. I was a prisoner, bound to its history, to its curse. The shadows, the whispering walls, the very air itself, they all conspired to strip away the last vestiges of my sanity. And then there were the sounds, the faint creak of the floorboards beneath my weight, the rhythmic tapping of something unseen against the walls. It came in intervals, precise and deliberate, as though it had learned the pattern of my unrest, seeking to bring me to the very edge of madness. The candle, my sole companion, flickered and sputtered as I moved from room to room, searching for an escape that did not exist. Yet each time I turned a corner, each time I looked into another room, I saw it, the shape standing just beyond the threshold. A shadow that moved against the grain of the candlelight. A face that was not a face, but something far worse, something that knew me, followed me. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped. The air in my throat was thick with fear, the realization that I could not outrun what was closing in on me. The faces returned. The shadows stretched longer, thinner, until they reached out toward me with claws that did not belong to human hands. I could not escape. The whispers were louder now. My eyes no longer saw the walls. They only saw the shapes that flitted within the dark. and still I could not escape, for in that moment I understood I was not meant to leave. It was madness. Surely it was madness. And yet, had I not already succumbed to its unrelenting grasp? Had I not surrendered to the pull of this accursed place, to the whispers that slithered through the walls, to the phantoms that haunted my waking hours as cruelly as they did my restless dreams? I could not leave, nor did I wish to. My soul, now wholly entwined with the house's dreadful breath, had but one purpose: to know. And so I found myself crouched upon the cellar's damp, unholy ground, my hands trembling as I tore at the stones beneath me. Something lay beneath the floor. I felt it, sensed it, as though the very earth pulsed with the heartbeat of something long buried, long forgotten. My fingers scraped against jagged rock, against damp soil that oozed like fetid flesh, and at last they met something else, something solid. A frantic, fevered energy overtook me, and with renewed desperation I pried open the floor, stones loosening with a dull, sickly pop. The candle beside me sputtered, casting violent, flailing shadows across the chamber's walls. I dug deeper, faster, until at last the earth surrendered its secret. A skeletal form lay contorted in the shallow grave, its bones twisted in some unspeakable agony. The skull, yellowed with time, bore a gaping maw, as if its last breath had been expelled in a scream too terrible to be heard. The limbs, bound by remnants of what had once been rope, were drawn inward, as though the body had writhed against its confinement, clawed against the inevitability of its fate. A gust of cold air rushed past me, a breath stolen from the abyss itself. My throat tightened, my hands quivered where they hovered above the corpse, unwilling to touch, yet unable to withdraw. The whispers surged closer now, insidious, mocking, and in that moment, as my breath came ragged, as my pulse rattled against my ribs, I knew this was no forgotten soul. This had been placed here, and it had been meant to remain undisturbed. For a long while I could do nothing but stare. The hollow sockets of the skull bore no eyes, no life, yet I felt its gaze, empty and eternal, pressing into my own. And then, as the candle's flame flickered, wavering, retreating from the horror it had revealed, I saw it. A locket, clutched within the corpse's bony fingers, half buried in the filth, its silver chain corroded with time, yet its form eerily preserved. A relic untouched by decay, gleaming faintly in the unholy dimness. My hand moved of its own volition, trembling as I reached for it, as I pried the skeletal fingers apart. The bones resisted, as though they sought to hold on, but they were brittle, and they yielded with a soft, crumbling protest. The locket fell into my palm, its weight unbearable, its touch unnaturally cold. A sense of vertigo gripped me, as though the ground beneath me no longer existed, as though I were suspended in the void of something far older than time itself. With hesitant fingers I pried it open, and then all breath abandoned me. Inside, beneath the cracked glass, lay a portrait, my own face, gaunt, haunted, my own eyes staring back at me with an expression I did not recognize, not a mere resemblance, nor a familial echo. It was me. The candle faltered, shadows lunging forward, as though reaching for me. The cellar groaned, the whispers shrieked. The skull, once lifeless, seemed to grin wider. I tried to move, to scream, to deny, but I knew. I had seen this before, I had been here before, and the house had been waiting for my return. A tremor coursed through the earth, deep and resonant, as though something buried far beneath had stirred from an ancient slumber. The very walls of the cellar exhaled, a slow, wretched sigh that slithered through the darkness and coiled around my spine. Dust rained down in soft, whispering cascades, catching the failing glow of my candle, swirling like the remnants of forgotten souls. The locket still trembled in my hand, its weight now unbearable, as though it sought to anchor me to the horror of what I had unearthed. My breath came in ragged, uneven gasps, my mind reeling against the undeniable truth that I had set something in motion, something long restrained, within the house's merciless grasp. Beneath me, the floor groaned, not in the weary voice of age, but in something deeper, something alive. The ground swelled and pulsed, the stones shifting as though pushed outward by unseen fingers. A nameless dread seized me, and I staggered backward, nearly toppling over the very grave I had disturbed. The whispers, oh, how they grew! They no longer drifted faintly from the walls, but rose in unholy harmony, a chorus of voices pleading, commanding, condemning. And then, beneath the cacophony, another sound, a guttural vibration, low and unnatural, emanating from the heart of the manor itself. The house had awakened. The ceiling shuddered, sending brittle fragments of stone crashing to the floor. The bookshelves trembled, their rotting contents slumping forward as though reaching for me with decayed and desperate hands. The rusted chains that adorned the walls clattered violently, their echoes merging with the wretched symphony of the whispering dead. I stumbled toward the stairway, my legs weak, my mind fraying at the edges of reason. The air had thickened, pressing upon my chest, suffocating, sentient. And in that terrible moment I understood, the manor had never been merely walls and stone. It was something more, something that knew. And I was inside it. A frantic, desperate need to escape overtook me. I lunged for the stairs, my fingers clawing at the damp stone, dragging myself upward toward the cellar door. Yet, even as my trembling hand reached for the handle, a flickering movement at the edge of my vision froze me in place, my shadow. It did not move, though I had stumbled forward, though my limbs had convulsed in terror. The dark shape cast upon the wall remained motionless, fixed, rooted, as though it no longer belonged to me. And then, horror beyond words. The shadow twitched. Not in mimicry of my motion, not in response to my trembling stance, but of its own accord, as though testing the boundaries of its newfound freedom. It stretched, elongated, unnatural and writhing, and in its silent, defiant movement, I saw the shape of something else, something grotesque, something that had always been there, waiting beneath my skin, behind my reflection, in the spaces where light dared not reach. My lips parted in a silent scream as the dark form twisted, its head tilting as though observing me. Then it stepped away. I felt it, the dreadful tearing within my very bones, the wrenching sensation as though some part of me had been ripped from my flesh and granted a ghastly existence of its own. The shadow no longer clung to my heels, no longer obeyed the flickering candle's laws. It stood, untethered, free. And it turned toward me. The candle faltered. The darkness surged forward, and in that instant I knew, with soul-crushing certainty, I had not simply lost my shadow. It had taken my place. The candle's light sputtered, shrinking into itself as though recoiling from the abomination before me. The air thickened, coiling around my throat like an unseen noose. My limbs trembled, not with the fevered tremors of fear alone, but with an unholy recognition. Before me, the shadows congealed, twisting, writhing, pulling themselves into a form both monstrous and familiar. It was no mere spectre, no forgotten ghost of the house's cruel past. It was something far worse. It was me. My own countenance, though stretched and sickened, stared back from the abyss. Hollowed, sunken eyes, eyes that had seen too much, that had remembered what I had sought to forget. The lips, dry and withered, curled into a knowing grimace, as though mocking the very breath that still filled my lungs. Its presence oozed forth, thick and inevitable, spilling from the corners of the chamber, a darkness that did not belong to mere shadow. It was neither dead nor alive, yet it was. And as it moved, oh, how it moved! It did so with an unnatural grace, slithering toward me, merging with the damp walls, dripping from the ceiling like a putrid mist. The whispers reached a terrible crescendo, their voices writhing in agony, in ecstasy. They chanted words I could not understand, yet somehow, in the marrow of my bones, I knew their meaning. They were welcoming me. I staggered backward, pressing against the cold, weeping stones, my breath coming in ragged gasps. But there was no escape, no salvation, for as I stared into the abyss of the thing that bore my likeness, as I watched its gaunt lips part in soundless laughter, I knew. It was not becoming me. It had always been me. The truth did not descend upon me as a revelation, nor did it strike like a bolt of divine terror. No, it seeped, slow and sickly, into the very fabric of my thoughts, poisoning me with the undeniable certainty of what had always been. I was not merely an heir to this house, I was its prisoner. This thing, this reflection, this grotesque facsimile of my own form, it was not some vengeful ancestor, nor a spectre of misdeeds long buried. It was myself, torn from the fabric of time, trapped within the inescapable cycle of this place. Had I not walked these halls before? Had my feet not already traced this cursed descent into darkness? The whispers, the voices, they did not call to warn me. They recognized me. They had always known me. I was the locket clutched within the corpse's fingers. I was the breath that lingered in the walls. I was the shadow that had broken free. I tried to scream, to deny, but my voice was swallowed before it ever touched the air. The entity stepped forward, its features melting into my own, its hollow gaze swallowing me whole. And as I fell into the abyss of its form, no, as I was pulled into it, I understood. I had been here before, I would be here again. And the house, patient and knowing, would always wait for my return. I turned and fled, a wild and desperate thing, my breath coming in ragged, strangled gasps. The walls seemed to close in upon me, pulsing, writhing, whispering, as if they themselves sought to ensnare me within their cursed grasp. My mind screamed for escape, for light, for air, untainted by the breath of the forgotten. I reached the staircase, staggering up the stone steps two at a time, my candle, long abandoned, to the abyss below. The cellar door loomed ahead, a promise of salvation, of release from the encroaching dark. My hands found the handle, cold, unyielding, and I pulled. It did not move. A cry, raw and wretched, tore from my throat. I grasped at the wood, nails digging into its splintered surface, tearing at it with the blind desperation of a man drowning in airless depths. Again I threw my weight against it, again and again, until my shoulder ached, until my fingers bled, until my breath came in short, sharp sobs of terror. The door did not yield. I pressed my ear against it, my pulse hammering beneath my skin. Silence. The world beyond had abandoned me, forsaken me, to the clutches of this house that breathed, that watched, that remembered. The whispers slithered closer, curling around me like 1,000 unseen fingers. They did not call from behind, they were within the walls, seeping from the stones, from the very foundation of the house itself. A low, shuddering moan rose from the depths below. The floor beneath my feet trembled. The door would not open. I was trapped. I was never meant to leave. The whispers rose into a frenzied cacophony, no longer soft, no longer distant. They wailed, shrieked, voices of the long forgotten, of the imprisoned, of those who had come before me and had never escaped. Their agony filled the chamber, reverberating against the stone, rattling within my very skull. I clutched at my ears, yet still they grew, weaving through my thoughts, pouring into every crevice of my mind. "He is ours," they cried. "He was always ours." The air turned thick, suffocating, pressing upon my lungs like the weight of unseen bodies. The walls trembled, the ceiling groaned, and beneath it all, beneath the shrieks and the wails, I heard another sound, a wet, slithering movement, as though something ancient and rotted stirred within the darkness below. My knees buckled, my vision swam, shadows coiled at the edges of my sight, stretching, reaching. The screams no longer came from the walls, they came from me. For in that moment I understood this was not madness, this was not some fevered nightmare conjured from the depths of my mind. This was fate. I had always been here. I opened my mouth to protest, to deny, but my own voice was lost among the damned. The house had claimed me. The whispers were no longer separate from me. They were within me. And I, like all who had come before, was forgotten. It loomed before me, a shifting, writhing thing, neither solid nor air, neither flesh nor phantom. It was darkness given form, a mockery of life, an entity whose very presence defied reason. And yet, despite its amorphous horror, I recognized it, for it was me. Its form flickered like smoke caught in a tempest, shifting and stretching, its limbs contorting as though struggling to hold their stolen shape. The face, if it could be called such, wavered, its features twisting in grotesque mimicry of my own, lips parting in a silent wail, eyes black voids of fathomless depth. It lunged. I stumbled backward, my breath a strangled gasp, my arms flailing against the suffocating dark. But there was no escape. It enveloped me, tendrils of shadow curling around my throat, my chest, my limbs, dragging me down, consuming me. A terrible cold seeped into my skin, an unearthly chill that gnawed at the marrow of my bones. My own hands, my own body began to dissolve, unraveling like frayed thread as the thing became me. I felt it. Oh God, I felt it, pulling at my mind, sinking into my thoughts, burrowing into the crevices of memory and fear. It did not merely seek to destroy me, it sought to replace me. The whispers rose to a deafening crescendo, their words now clear, their message undeniable. He has returned. The cycle begins anew. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed whole. Darkness surged forward, and I was no more. A hush fell, a silence so complete, so final, that it felt as though the world itself had ceased to exist. And then, "Help me!" The voice tore through the stillness, raw and desperate, filled with the last gasping remnants of mortal fear. It was a plea, a cry of anguish, one that echoed through the corridors of the forsaken house, one that came from above. And yet I had not spoken. I could not speak. The realization struck me like a dagger through the soul. The voice, it was mine. Somewhere, beyond the walls of the cellar, beyond the grasp of the forgotten, I heard myself calling. I heard my own voice shrieking for salvation, for escape. But I knew, oh, how I knew that no one would answer. For I had heard this voice before. It had belonged to those who had come before me, those who had called in vain, as they too were swallowed by the darkness, trapped in the eternal, inescapable grasp of the house. I was the voice now. I had always been the voice. And as the last flickering ember of my existence was extinguished, the house stood silent once more, waiting patiently for the next fool to arrive. Waiting for the cycle to begin again. All was silent. The walls, once trembling with their hideous utterances, grew still. The whispering voices, the wailing lamentations, the ceaseless murmuring chorus of the damned faded into the abyss. The house had fed. The house had claimed what was always meant to be claimed. I was no more, and yet I was not gone. I lingered, suspended in the stagnant air, trapped between what once was and what would always be. I did not move, for I had no form with which to do so. I did not breathe, for breath no longer belonged to me. I did not cry out, for my voice had been swallowed by the house, just as it had swallowed the cries of all those before me. And so the house grew quiet once more. Above, beyond the walls of this wretched place, the world continued, the sky darkened and brightened again, indifferent to the horrors beneath it. The town beyond the gates remained unaware, its people oblivious to the truth that slumbered in the depths of the earth, but the house knew, it always knew, and it waited. For time is a cruel and patient thing. Generations will pass, the name of the house will fade from memory, but blood will always return to where it was first spilled. Another heir will come, another curious soul drawn by the whispers they cannot explain, by the pull of the inheritance they never sought. And they too will descend. They will hear the voices. They will see the shadows that do not belong. They will feel the air grow thick with something unseen, something ancient, something hungry. And when they pry open the floor, when they unearth the bones twisted in eternal torment, when their trembling hands grasp at the locket clenched within the skeletal grip, they will see a face staring back at them, a face they recognize, a face that was always their own. And the cycle will begin again.